Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is Debate Sensei CEDA Edition, where we talk about things relevant to the cross-examination, debate association, competitive debate. I have with me the director of debate from California State University, Long Beach, Devin Cooper. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Last time we were talking, one of the positions that kept on coming up, I guess one of the positions that seemed to have some traction at a previous tournament was about elections. And so I became a little intrigued about how elections affect debate, specifically CEDA debate, like it's something with a year-long topic. And so I wanted to dive deeper into it. And that's what we're talking about today. Excellent. So elections. The first thing, let's talk a little bit. How are these election arguments being framed, like right now in tournaments? How are they? What are the ones that you need to be looking out for?
So as of right now, the disad is pretty much, it could go like a few ways. I've not seen it go the other way yet, but I'm sure someone might. But like the main way is that people are constructing a disad around the uniqueness that Kamala is winning the election right now. And the link is usually that the plan does something to cause her to lose, whether that is like the policy will galvanize MAGA voters, or the policy will make it so that Trump is able to blast it to get more like credibility or more votes. Right. And so what happens then is that that particularly will cause Trump to win. And then the impact scenario is like a plethora of things that Trump could possibly do to like cause nuclear war, cause more war, cause World War III, armed conflict, pulling out of certain treaties, doing certain policies that'll be bad for international relations, all of that stuff. And so that's usually how it's run.
Is this, or would you classify this as just like a version of a politics disadvantage?
Yeah, it's the main.
Yeah, right.
It's like, well, I wouldn't say it is the main, but it is one of the more popular ones that people are able to create more direct, less generic scenarios around. Because like all the other politics scenarios, it's usually like very generic. It's very like trade-off or political capital or things of that nature. But like elections disad and also the midterm elections disad is ones that allow for a very particular story to be told that is very like predictable in the outcome if we are saying that a particular party or a particular president is going to win or lose.
Right. Yeah, because the way, or at least one of the ways I learned politics was that eventually you get into the discussion about how politics is this zero-sum game where they have to, like, if there's a victory on one side, then the other side has to declare some sort of victory or claim some sort of victory, and then it just opens up just this door for you to pick and choose what you want them to do in response to it.
But there is another way.
Okay, let's hear this.
The elections disad is you could say that Trump is winning now.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. I want to know, like, it's probably one of the closer races polling wise that I can remember. So like right off the bat, when you're like, oh, well, Kamala's winning, I'm like, really? You know, like, so.
Well, because like these elections disads either will have the scenario of like, for this instance, a Kamala good scenario or a Trump good scenario.
Okay.
Right. And so in a world where you create a scenario where Kamala's bad, you would be saying that Trump is winning the election right now. The plan does something to cause him to lose.
Right.
And then you would have to create some type of scenario where if Kamala wins, some bad things or happen.
Okay, now
I haven't seen that one yet,
seen
though.
that yet. Like,
No.
I'm having a hard time hypothesizing what that might look like, though. You know what I mean? It's like especially in
The
front.
economy. They could say the economy.
Yeah.
They could say like immigration.
Mm.
All types, like they can just, whatever the issue is that she is weak on or allegedly weak on or doesn't have a good strong policy around,
Mm-hmm.
some people can say that that is the scenario that they're crafting.
Right.
But yeah,
so another weakness that, I don't know, as I'm hearing just sort of the overall story unveiling, but let me put it this way: what AFs are they running? Are they running on all AFs?
all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
so there's some apps that are more critical.
Yeah.
That it's really hard to find a link, but like I've definitely seen someone read an elections disad against a black team to say that like their AF is going to dissuade black people from voting or taking part of the electoral process, which causes Trump to win, something like that. So
okay, like,
could be a thing.
when I learned critiques, it was always like we were always taught to try to make things pre-fiat, right? Like try to make these, and so the pre-fiat implication seems like the discussion that these debaters are having are going to make our community that hears this AF not vote. Is that really what the story is?
Well, it's more so that, hey, you have this radical politics in your 1AC. That radical politics trades off with like black people participating in like voting, stuff like that, that might cause Trump to win. And so the issue is that, and a lot of people don't always understand this as a strategy, that sometimes people don't usually go for the elections disad or like a regular disad against a K team in that world. But if you literally say no link and they have ran framework, then they're able to like galvanize that particular move to say, hey, we don't get ground, we don't get the core generics.
Okay.
You no linked it.
All right.
So some people will get up and say, no, go ahead, read your disads, it's all good. And then you read the disads and they have to functionally turn disad real bad and like say it's not gonna happen, it's false scenario, like ideological, all this other stuff. But if they're not as robust against the disad, then the disad could possibly win the debate in a world where they may not go for framework, but some judges will buy it.
All right. So yeah, it's almost like how I learned how to run T, where you're running like a ground argument, right, or a ground standard, and you're like, you're not giving us disad ground, and then you run your disad ground, and they're like, no link. You're like, there, I proved it. Yeah, pretty much the same thing. So the reason I was asking is like on what ACs they're running it on, is because you're just talking about how popular like the cap and trade 1AC is, right? And I can see how this would be.
Or carbon tax,
or carbon tax, right? Cap and trade or carbon tax are really, really popular on this decarbonization topic. I don't know. I think that when I was debating, there wouldn't be too much pushback against that. But as somebody who's like just kind of living in the world now, I'm like, really, you think carbon tax is going to be the thing that changes people's mind about which way to vote? Is that like a popular response?
Well, sometimes, but I think that largely what people oftentimes say is that carbon tax is perceived as a punitive action against businesses.
Okay.
And Trump is able to run that as she is like anti-business and she's like blowing up the extremes of climate change like unverifiably, pretty much.
Right.
So, because that's what it is. Carbon tax is seen as, a tax on the emissions that a company will produce. And so in a world, that's not a pro-business policy. And Trump is very pro-business.
Right.
And so in a world where she was to do that, Trump is able to galvanize more support because it's like, hey, businesses, if you don't want this, this carbon tax to continue, you gotta let me in office. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of like the scenario there.
Yeah. Like, so the issue I got is that makes sense on paper. It totally makes sense on paper, right? But I'm trying to imagine that actually happen. I'm really trying to like put myself, it's like, okay, all of a sudden this carbon tax comes out. Do I really think people are going to be like, oh my God, that was it? That was the thing I was waiting for. Now I know that I'm going to vote against her. Right. It's like,
Well, I think the internal link of that is just that businesses could possibly run ads,
go,
right?
okay.
Businesses like corporations can also like there could be consequences because if the carbon tax becomes a thing, these
Yeah.
corporations might jack up the prices of things, and so that hurts the consumers that are voting, and that could be ran as Trump's kind of platform against her now.
Okay.
So that could be a thing.
Now,
Not something that will actually happen, but I'm pretty sure in this election that's really close, that could be a thing.
all right. Now there's one, like we got one, the Harvard tournament's coming up, right? Is that this weekend?
On Saturday.
So is this the last tournament where?
No.
Okay.
So it's probably the last national tournament, but like there are regional tournaments that are happening, in between that.
Okay.
Like, and also we have CSUN, which is another local tournament, which is all service, has Lincoln Douglas, Parley, IPDA, policy, speech. And so that will be literally the weekend before the election. So I'm pretty sure the elections decided is going to be there.
Okay. Now, technically, it's before the election. Technically, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like in a real world scenario, even if that policy passed on the day that debate was happening, like the amount of time that it would take for everything to kind of fall into effect seems like you don't have a timeline for, like, even if you're right that people care about this, it's like too many people have already voted, not enough people are going to like see these ads, businesses can't get their shit together to run these ads or produce them in time. So even if you're right that people don't like this, you don't get to the impact level. Is that
well in the world of fiat that could be possible?
Oh,
sure it is. In the world of fiat that could exist. I mean, because like that's the thing, is that like we're trying to act as if like this is something that has already passed,
right?
Because through fiat, that's would be a thing.
Right.
It would
Right.
passed already, and so we would be imagining that this stuff was like kind of automatically a consequence. So that's why that answer is kind of a hard sell if you're not a K team.
Okay. So let's transition to the K teams then. It's like, so we have a 1AC comes out, it's a critical AF, and you already said that like they do like a framework argument and also the elections disad.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping in mind that an affirmative team has the forethought to not delink, right? To not give them that ammunition. What's the strategy at that point?
Well, so sometimes that becomes a thing. I don't think that everybody chooses to go the no link route.
Right.
They can, but like you gotta say more to the disad than just no link.
Right.
But if no link is the major thing and there's not like a lot of offense on the disad, that becomes a little problematic for some coaches or judges, because for them, in their minds, they're constructing an abuse story on framework. They're saying, well, there it is. You said no link. So what can they read against you that will actually link as a disad? They can't get access to core generic ground. Right. So this is why in a world where you're not trying to say no link, you'll probably try to do a link turn, or you might impact turn the disad, or you might say like a bunch of like denial of the logic behind the disad, like realist predictions, right? Because of course, like the impact, if you're thinking about the Kamala good scenario is that you're saying that Trump will cause like all these like international existential threats and blah blah blah, then it's just like then you're questioning the line of thought and theories behind realism and hegemony and things of that nature. Then that's how you kind of like will start to answer it. You also could probably talk about how the election process is a bit rigged, how there's massive disenfranchisement voters, right? Like the prison industrial complex disincentivizes and takes away people's rights to vote. So it's a rigged process anyway. We cannot always predict the outcome. You could go with some theories that are like, well, the powers that be have already chosen who they want to be president.
Okay.
The electoral college is already going to choose. It's rigged. Like all that stuff. Like there's a lot of like critical ways to answer an election's disad. It's just that some people are not always thinking about it outside of just saying no link.
Okay. All right. So what happens after November 5th? Like what happens to all these positions and all these arguments? Do people adapt them?
Well, yeah. Well, this becomes a different politics scenario.
Okay.
So they will probably go with like political capital disad for politics.
Yeah, politics.
Which might be around some crucial legislation or bill that exists, and they'll say, oh, if whoever the president invests their political power into doing the AF, it takes away the political capital for getting this other thing passed, which is good, and causes this bad thing if it doesn't pass. So that's one of the things. But some people will come up with different types of political scenarios that exist, but as of right now, that's one of the core generics that's almost in every 1NC if you're like not engaging.
Yeah, like if you're not engaged, especially if you're not engaging, right? The politics disadvantage. Is there an impact scenario that is most popular? Let's just start with the most popular one. Then I got a second to follow up.
It's literally that Trump causes all these bad things.
But is it like nuclear war?
Yeah, it just lists a laundry list of things that he'll just do bad, and then some of those lead into war. Like he'll make the Ukraine situation worse because he'll pull out aid from Ukraine, and the Ukraine will just pretty much collapse.
Got it.
They'll talk about like Trump will not enter in good treaties that are good for like international peace. He'll pull out certain things like the Paris Agreement or all these other stuff, like just like all those scenarios, and they just kind of like find ways in which to create the specific scenario in the block, because they'll read a very general card in the 1NC. Sometimes it'll say like Trump will do this, 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 and this, and this, and this will be bad, right? And it'll cause some catastrophic stuff. Or they'll talk about what a Trump presidency is, right? And so, you could also even do stuff like, Trump will cause like a national abortion ban, which could perpetuate a lot of the, femicide, and also like, what do you call it?
Yeah. Like what?
Abortion.
So, man, when I learned how to use non-uniqueness as a response, like it opened up my world in debate. And so I love going for even though it's defense, I understand it's defense, you know what I mean? But man, I love me some good defense, you know what I mean? Because it seems very realistic. And so on this one about like, oh, Trump's going to go crazy and he's going to do crazy stuff. Like that seems like a giant non-unique to me. Like there's no way to predict why he's going to do crazy shit. Like that's like by definition, there's no way. Like so.
Yeah, I mean, largely you want to just like no impact.
Yeah. Okay.
But like, I mean, because if people are smart, what they'll start doing is talking about like how there's internal checks that are going to make it so that he can't go off the rails and do all these things. Mm-hmm. What people should also do is criticize the author that is making these claims about what the next Trump presidency will be. Because they don't have any definitive like correlation or connection to what that'll actually be. They're really just speculating to say that that's a thing. And those are buzzwords that trigger a lot of the liberal judges that exist in policy debate.
Okay. Yeah.
Like you can
Like
kind
what?
of get away with that type of scenario with the liberal judges of debate, or people who think that they're liberal in debate, to say like Trump's presidency will absolutely be bad. So,
do you think that the elections positions you're seeing this year are any different than in previous years that you've seen them? Substantively, I mean, obviously, we're talking about players.
Well, because the thing is that Trump is just such a different polarizing figure that it makes it a lot more sharp contrast between the candidates. Same thing when it was like 2016 with Hillary and Trump.
Right.
Those, like, that kind of is a very good contrast, between what would be the thing. Because like when there was like the Obama like
McCain
election, it wasn't like McCain is absolutely going to cause blah, 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 terrible, bad stuff. It's more like based on maybe a bill or a law or something that they talked about on the campaign trail that might be bad. But it never really rose fully or hardcore to the level of what Trump presidency would be.
Right.
Because I think like Trump stuff is such an anomaly to the larger politics. I mean, well, to be honest, I was not in debate when the Bush-Gore politics decided run, but I'm pretty sure that probably has some stark contrasts as well.
That was some wild times, man. But it seems like it just is crazy in politics this time. So like I don't even know how you would be able to study whether or not there is a marked difference in the elections positions that you have now versus in previous.
Well, because I think that like Trump is a lot more vocal, and the social media is a thing that's bigger now. You can see like a lot more of the progression of the campaigns, as opposed to like the early 2000s where Facebook was just coming about. And so I think that like the necessity for presidential candidates to have social media makes it so that it becomes a lot more visible of how you can predict possible outcomes of what their policies might be or what they stand for. So I think that's kind of what is majorly different from like the Obama election. I mean, there was social media during Obama, but it was like relatively like not as hot like it is right now. So
they like people have
his first term.
Yeah, people have really figured out how to tap into that in every way possible. So when there aren't any elections, like, does that mean that people just bust out their elections folder every other year? Is that what happens?
Well, they busted out for the midterm elections and for the general elections, but like sometimes people could do like other elections. Sometimes they do it like other countries sometimes.
Oh, other countries. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, like that could be a thing. It's just like but it's more so if it's an international policy topic that we're talking about.
Okay.
Like, for example, if we were to do a topic that we would say another country would model, and we would say, oh, this person in that country is up for election and re-election or something. And if we pass this and this country signs on to it, it risks the chance of this other person losing the election, and that would ascend a dictator or something like that. So kind of like that stuff, like you can have like other country election scenarios, but it also requires you to know stuff about the politics of that country and what that means. A lot of times I've seen that with European elections as well as Latin America.
Okay. Latin America. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like in Europe, there's been a pretty heavy movement toward the right in a lot of those places, and so I can see how that would be a scenario that comes up as well.
Populism.
Yes. Um, so talking about how the critical positions, going back to how critical positions interact with election positions, this election seems to have some very interesting discussions about um, uh, identity and race and how those constituents are a lot lining up. Specifically, the most recent thing I've been hearing about is how there's a gulf being created between like black men and women voters. That there's like what 25% of black men say that they're voting for Trump, which is
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Okay.
I mean, but like, because the thing is that I've just been all over social media in different places looking at like people when they stream or when they go live and when they bring up people who are in the chat, especially on Instagram. And like a lot of black men that I've seen respond and say things, and granted, this is probably around like the 20, 25, 30 mark. A lot of them were just like, yeah, both of them are like not good. And I'm just not going to vote at all because I feel like this is just like, I'm not trying to do that lesser two evils thing, blah, 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 like that type of thing. And so I feel like a lot of people oftentimes, especially black men, have just grown apathetic to like the whole situation when it comes to voting. I mean, black people in general in a lot of places.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but I feel like that could play a portion into the elections disad if people wanted to go that route. When it comes to like talking about particular issues, or if they're answering the disad, there could be a thing, right?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Specifically the answers, right?
Yeah, because she's rolled out like policy or proposals for black men and for Latino men. And so that could possibly be something of a uniqueness overwhelms the link. It's like, hey, she rolled out these policies. She's going to win because she's going to be able to galvanize some of that percentage to come out and vote for her because she's made specific policy proposals for them, right? Like that could be a thing. And or also like if there's an issue that's popular amongst black people that she has pushed, that could increase her chances of getting more of the quote unquote black vote.
Yeah, like as a judge, when I'm in the back of the room and I have somebody who has this critical app and then somebody's trying to, and the other side's trying to do straight up like policy responses, and we're getting into this framework argument, the more that the affirmative can frame their responses in a way that is consistent with the 1AC, not just straight up, like generic policy responses that you'd expect, you know what I mean? But like you're extending your narrative through that that would seem to be like an opportunity to really turn, not just link out of it, but just turn that narrative about elections and outcomes and how what would happen critically from this one as well.
Well, one way that people have ventured out into answering this is saying that Kamala is going to constantly back a genocide.
Oh God. Oh, Israel.
Yeah.
Israel. Got it. Yeah.
So that could be one of the things in which they're saying that, hey, you might say Trump is bad, XYZ, but she's literally like backing and aiding the genocide of Palestinian folks. And that should be a reason why she should lose the election. Right. And people could say that, but they were like, oh, but Trump is worse. And it's just like, yeah, Trump might be worse in particular aspects, but like Trump is not actively aiding a genocide right now, which is
French. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, he moved the what you call it, the thing to Jerusalem, not the consulate, the
embassy,
the embassy to Jerusalem. And, I could see him. Like it seems like on the level of Israel, there's really not much of a difference between, like you can't really put a piece of paper between them on that one issue.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's one of the ways that critical teams will say it's just like, you know, she's going to lose the election on other reasons, but
Right.
also we're not going to ethically sit up and condone her as a moral leader when she's engaging in a genocide. And the fact that you are saying the scenario that Kamala's good
Okay.
is you
Okay.
like pretty much being complicit with a genocide.
Okay.
Because if you're explicitly saying that Trump is bad, then automatically, if you're reading elections this sad, you're saying that a Harris win would be better.
Right.
So therefore, you are like incentivizing and projecting that we should allow Kamala to win, even though she is actively engaging in the backing of a genocide.
Yeah, and that type of response I could absolutely see being like really consistent with whatever the 1AC was, right?
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely can see that. All right. Well, I was skeptical that we would be able to fill 30 minutes with this, but that was absolutely not a problem at all as far as elections go. Yeah, so in a couple of years, maybe do this again, see how it
The
goes.
midterm elections.
Yeah, do the midterm elections, but
I mean, that's the same thing. It's like, I mean, it's like if, well, more than likely, people always try to go for the Democrat win scenario. Like, you know, if Democrats, I mean, if you pass the plan, you know, it'll cause the Democrats to lose, and therefore the Republicans will do some really bad stuff, and it'll cause XYZ big impact.
yeah. But I mean, it's unlikely that Trump's ever going to run again and win or lose. You know what I mean? For a variety of reasons, right? But this is very likely his last election. So I'm wondering, yeah, if there'd be any market difference in when we see these election DAs again in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe. All right. Devin, thank you so much for helping me out on understanding this in a greater depth. We will be back talking about more stuff, talking about CEDA debate in the future.
All right.
All right. See ya. Let me get where are we?